Hi, Professor. This is Dan Lyons, and this is my independent study on the experiences, challenges, and preparation for expats taking international assignments. First, we'll be evaluating the general attitude and preparation that the business world takes in preparing employees for overseas assignments. Why would you send an employee abroad? Are they prepared, and why do so many fail? We will then evaluate how employees are prepared for specific countries. We will focus on Japan, the UK, the UAE, and China. We will also make suggestions or point out opportunities for companies to improve the experience and the reintegration of expats going to or returning from assignments in these countries. Lastly, I will share some feedback from expats who have spent time abroad and what their experiences have been for them, their families, and the ways in which they could have been more prepared for this experience. Why send an employee abroad? Over the last 20 years, the perception of an employee accepting an international assignment has transformed. In the past, an employee who requested or accepted an international assignment was viewed as someone who was not a candidate for top leadership at a company's headquarters. This was not considered a valuable skill at the time. But now, according to a study by Healthy Companies International, that's no longer the case. 3/4 of Fortune 100 CEOs today have spent at least 2 years working in a senior position overseas. 10 years ago, about half of CEOs had held senior positions overseas, according to the study. It's not just CEOs who are going abroad. The percentage of Fortune 100 C-suite executives, those whose titles often begin with chief, who have had senior responsibilities overseas, has jumped to 71% from 48% just 10 years ago. Going back even further, say 20 years ago, and you'll find companies in which overseas assignments actually would take an employee off the internal executive track. It's easy to understand why overseas experience is so valued in a global company. But do companies prepare employees for overseas assignments? If so, how do they do it? Are they thorough? Let's find out. According to a recent survey by Wright, an average of 16% of companies globally give minimal to no preparation at all. And for North American employers, it's 22% that do virtually nothing to prepare an employee for an overseas assignment. Only 14% of companies globally provide in-depth cultural training before sending a manager to a foreign office. Based on these statistics, one must conclude that there is little preparation because most managers are successful without the preparation, and they'll figure it out when they're there. That, of course, is incorrect. According to this survey, 42% of managers fail when they are sent abroad. Why do so many fail? Inadequate preparation is a major reason overseas assignments fail, according to the Society for Human Resource Management. The most common methods of preparing employees for foreign assignments are giving an overview of cultural differences, providing language training, and that's it. For many employees and their families, this type of preparation is insufficient and leads to tension and issues at home and at work. Another key component of why expats fail is because of a mismatch between the employee or their family and the culture and traditions of the foreign country. According to Ron Palenzo, a global leader in human resources, he says, most expat failures are attributed to a mismatch of the individual's spouse or family members and believe that pre-assignment training and counseling will fix the problem. But the most critical mismatches of an expat with wide differences in values, beliefs, managerial style, and team orientation in a different cultural setting will blow up the assignment and leave a wake of destruction behind. He also said that all the training and preparation in the world cannot fix the wrong person going into the wrong country or region where the differences are so huge they cannot be overcome by preparation before or during an assignment. What this clearly tells you is it's not just picking the top executives or the top hot at your company. You must pick someone who's able to adapt and have a good match with the culture that they are going into. Speaking of a culture that's difficult to adapt, let's talk about Japan. First, let's talk about some of the challenges that expats face when getting an assignment in Japan. One of the major challenges of working in Japan is the language barrier. In Japan, Japanese is the language of business. Expats have to learn Japanese if they want to truly thrive. An expat can get hurt without the language, but this failure to effectively communicate with colleagues and customers can also hurt you professionally. Japan can also be challenging for the families of expats. The language barrier is an issue for spouses and children. It tends to limit interaction to only other expats and hinders integration into Japanese society. One of the values of going abroad is learning about and integrating into a new culture. Japan is one of the more difficult cultures for expats to integrate into. The work culture of Japan can also be a challenge for expats. For most, the workday starts between 9 and 10 a.m., finishing around 6 p.m., and then reconvening at around 7 at a bar or restaurant. The idea of family time or relaxing outside of work is not a key part of the Japanese work culture. Salarymen, as they are called in Japan, tend to stay out late and socialize with each other. This is how bonds in business are formed. For an expat to be successful, they have to conform to this new way of doing business and build relationships. If they resist, they will be ostracized. For a culture like Japan, it is critical to have someone who is local on the ground to help support the integration of the expat and their family. Leaving them to figure it out is not conducive to a successful assignment. Employers should set up mentors and hosts for at least 12 months. They must also strongly encourage the entire family to learn the language and interact outside the expat circles to become more integrated and settled into the culture. Now I would like to shift gears and talk about expats that have assignments in the UK. Let's talk about some of the challenges about working in the UK. Many see the United Kingdom as being one of the easier places to do an expat assignment, especially if they are European or American. Language is generally not an issue, but there are still challenges that lead to culture shock. One of the initial challenges for some is the food in the UK. Yes, I know this may seem like a little thing, but many expats and their wives have trouble assimilating because they're usually disappointed in their dining or shopping options. Although this may seem trivial, it is a key component to assimilating and avoiding culture shock. Accents and vernacular are also a challenge for English-speaking expats working in the UK. Many times the pronunciation or accent is taken for granted, and this can lead to miscommunication. For some, the size of living quarters and the cost of goods are a huge shock when working in the UK. The prices of clothes, technology, and food is much higher than in the United States, and probably some of the highest prices in the world. This is a critical point for expats who usually are reduced to one salary if married because of their assignment. There are usually few opportunities for spouses to find legal paying work in the UK based on their welfare system. One expat spouse shared that she had a hard time finding volunteer work to do in London because the attitude that she made a Londoner's job. Keep in mind that this was volunteer work. Let's talk about how you would prepare for a UK assignment. Similar to all the countries we will cover, most employees are briefed on the business side of the UK office and given some cultural training. This is, of course, usually inadequate. Many companies just make documents available online that contain the do's and don'ts of a culture. They may set you up with someone to help you logistically when you arrive so that housing and transportation is provided. After that, many expats are on their own and usually rely on their UK counterparts to informally show them the ropes. I interviewed the CFO of a large medical information company that spent a year and a half in England. And his words were, they helped us find an apartment, told us where the buses were, and then let us off on our own. This is someone who has a high position and was brought over there to advise the UK into their integration into electronic medical records. Here are some suggestions on how you should prepare an employee for an assignment in the UK. When preparing the employee for the assignment, it's critical to not underplay the challenges and opportunities they are going to face. It's important that they understand the financial implications for an expat and their family. For double-income households, the trip may actually be a financial burden. An employer must help an employee understand clearly that the opportunity may pay dividends down the line, but could cost money up front. If the employee has school-age children, it's also critical to explain and have someone on the ground in the UK how the school system works and advise them on how this experience will translate when the assignment is over and they reintegrate into their home country. These are critical lessons that may be overlooked or just seen as part of the expat or their spouse's assignment, and it would make for an easier transition and a less chance of failure if companies took those next steps to truly prepare the expats for what they were going to be going through. Having a stable home life and family life is critical to having a successful assignment, and we'll talk more in a minute. Next, we will discuss the UAE, or the United Arab Emirates. 20 years ago, the idea of working and thriving in the Middle East for a foreigner was a very foreign idea. That has changed, and there are currently 6.5 million expats living in the UAE, the majority in Dubai. But the United Arab Emirates is one of the most popular expat destinations in the world. Even with this popularity, there are still many challenges. Like the two other previously mentioned locations, the UAE is expensive, and most families will have to adjust and live off of one salary. As also mentioned, it's important to understand this before accepting the assignment. One other part that's important for all expats to understand is the tax structure of the place that you're going. The UAE does not have personal income tax, but this does not mean that expats do not have to pay taxes at home. Understanding the differences in taxation is critical to gauge the true cost of taking a foreign assignment. A challenge unique to the UAE is the vast cultural differences based on Muslim culture in the UAE. Interactions between males and females in public is highly regulated and could be criminal. This is important to understand and decide if this law is acceptable before accepting an assignment. Previously, I mentioned how many failures are attributed to mismatching the wrong employee with the wrong assignment. It's important to gauge the ability of your employee to work in the Middle East. Openness to their culture, their beliefs, are critical factors to having a successful assignment. It is also absolutely critical to make sure that the expat's family is comfortable with these beliefs as well. A recent study of 100 expats found some additional challenges. Obtaining a local driver's license, finding employment, and the high cost of living were all challenges for those who are looking to go to the UAE and have an international assignment. Helping expats with logistics on the ground is a key point to helping them focus on their new role and reduce stress at home and at work. For many, moving to the UAE can be a dynamic experience. Because so many expats stay close to their community, many of the same amenities that are found at home are found abroad. One difference is the climate in the UAE. Many expats commented that the heat is oppressive and wearing. For those from the West, this is a unique climate. For the most part, though, the UAE has been described as straightforward. Because of the expat community, most companies do not fully prepare their employees for an assignment in the UAE because they expect that they will only integrate with other expats. For the most part, though, the UAE has, because of the expat community, most companies just give the expats cultural do's and don'ts, and there's little training or actual cultural learning. Most expats choose to keep within the community and not indulge in the culture. For those that do explore outside of the expat community, the opinion is that the people are outgoing and caring. One foreigner noted that they felt like a celebrity because they are all treated so nicely. Here are my suggestions for how a company should prepare an employee for an assignment in the UAE based on my research. Because of the global nature of the business in the UAE, learning the language is not as critical as in a place like China or Japan. English is the language of business, and there are many Western companies doing business in the UAE. Most companies provide their employee with basic cultural training, but not the do's and don'ts. I would encourage a company to help an expat and their family integrate more into the culture of the UAE. This is an experience that can teach a leader how to work with people of different cultures and different backgrounds, and if they are the right fit, how to have an open mind. In the UAE, cultural do's and don'ts take on a higher risk because local laws are much more conservative than most home countries and could lead to jail time and/or embarrassing the company. As I mentioned, most expats who go to the UAE end up interacting little with those outside of their expat community. Some believe this has a lot to do with the cultural differences between the West and the Middle East. I believe that it's because it's also not really encouraged if it's a Western company. Additionally, many companies that do business in the Middle East encourage their employees to take advantage of these expat communities to really, because for a company, getting an employee comfortable quickly is the number one goal. I believe if they took a broader look at where they were working, and if the UAE is a true destination for future business, having them step outside the expat community could be very valuable to a company. The last country that we're going to discuss is China. China has long been a career stop on the career ladder for those in the manufacturing and production business. Now with an exploding middle class, China is a key destination for most industries. But what are some of the challenges an expat may face when accepting a role in China? One of the biggest challenges for expats working in China is connecting with Chinese employees and colleagues. China and Japan are similar in that they want to get to know their colleagues before they trust them. Their boss is more of a family member or parent than a stranger. Once that trust is built, it is much easier to connect and ask for changes for them. This is hard for some expats, and many ignore the Confucian principles that many Chinese base their behavior on. In Confucian thinking, thriftiness, perseverance, self-control, and respect for authority are desirable personal goals. These values are played out in the workplace by employees who avoid wastefulness, refrain from telling a boss the job cannot be done, and showing loyalty to a cooperative but not performing team. This can be difficult for many expats to understand because they would assume that if you cannot do the job, you should tell me and I will get you more resources. Or if your team is not performing well, you would not be loyal to them because you want to succeed. Another challenge is the possibility that the Chinese may be outright rude to foreigners who come to China. Many Chinese feel that foreigners force their way into China and are not appreciative of them now working in China. Expats must accept that this attitude does exist and be aware of it. This can be very hard for many. For children and for spouses, this is also an awareness that needs to be made to them as well. Not everyone will treat you well, and this is a good lesson to learn and a good expectation to have. Learning the language is not as necessary as it is in Japan, but it is valuable. China has so much global influence that English is taught in most schools. It is an advantage for a Westerner to speak Mandarin or Cantonese, depending on where you plan to reside, to really communicate with your employees, and with your superiors at the Chinese office. As you can see on this slide, these are two comic strips talking about the expat experience in China. I prefer the one on the right that talks about an expat Thanksgiving in China. I'll give you a second to read it. What this comic also uncovers is how the experience is different depending on which part of China you're having your expat, you're living during your time as an expat. I think it's in the Xinjiang province where the little boy says, "Mom, can we do Pizza Hut like last year for Thanksgiving?" And she says, "This is the only turkey in town. You better enjoy it." That speaks to some of the issues expats have in bringing their culture to a foreign place. For many, the experience in China is always evolving. I personally spent some time in China in 2005, and my stories are far different from colleagues who spend time there now. It is important to understand that this is a growing economy, and that it is now going through some of the pains that accompany rapid growth. More than the three previous countries mentioned, China is a large economy with a restricted currency that can be frustrating for many. Many expats are leaving China because they can never fully integrate, and are additionally worried that the social reforms that need to happen will be accompanied by unrest against the government. But many have said the experience has helped them when returning from China in their current or in a new job. A Chinese experience is a badge of honor for many in the professional world. China, as you have heard with the three previous countries, had very little outside of do's and don'ts to help train expats before they head to China. Depending on your industry, it's important to protect trade secrets when doing business in all countries, but particularly China, and employees should be prepared for this. Companies should train employees on the loose copyright and patent laws in China. Losing intellectual property is another watch out on top of the challenge of acclimating to a new and sometimes hostile society. The recommendations that I would have for an expat going into China: do your best to learn the language. Be aware of the cultural and social differences in China. Reach out to other expats who have come back and talk to them about their challenges. And find someone on the ground in China who can help you assimilate and integrate into Chinese culture and society. Lastly, I'm going to finish up with some of the themes I uncovered during my research. The first theme is that no matter what industry you are in, there are few examples of expats feeling fully prepared for international assignments. No amount of training can replace the culture shock of an international assignment. For most companies, the success really depends on who is picked rather than how much they were trained. Companies should look for talent that are more suitable for international assignments and not focus on just the top performers. Their skill sets and personalities may not be the right fit for important foreign markets. As you can see in this chart on the left, this is a normal cultural adaptation curve for those who are going overseas. There's the obvious honeymoon period in the beginning, and then as they're there for 3 or 4 months, hostility begins to build up. After the 5th month, they start to laugh about some of the things that they've seen because they're feeling more integrated, and by the 6th or 7th months, they're starting to get more integrated. What this chart leaves out is some of the challenges that a family may face. And as you see on the right is just a picture of someone traveling all over the world. And to me, what this means is the second theme, that it's highly dependent on the happiness of an employee's family life. Much of my research revealed that the spouse and children of the expat must be part of the equation when deciding what the right choice is for an international assignment. If this is ignored, both the company and the employee are taking massive risks. Keeping an employee happy and their spouse and children content will lead to a more productive and more successful international assignment, as long as you've chosen the right person. All the preparation in the world must also consider the rest of the family when making these decisions and the best way to prepare. I recently spoke to someone who's on an international assignment in Japan. And although that it was challenging and they could have used more support, the company did provide him and his wife with Japanese language lessons for 120 private hours of tutoring. They also provided them with a driver and a car at all times to take them to where they needed to go, and that is for the first year of their assignment. I mentioned to this person that this sounded like an adequate preparation, and what he said was, there's never going to be enough preparation for an assignment like this. So with that, professor, this is my project. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a great rest of the summer. Thank you.